The twin suns glowed through the crystalline dome of the Galactic Military Academy, casting pale gold and silver shadows across the polished floors. The air hummed with nervous excitement as a new batch of cadets filed into Main Hall. Some walking tall with pride, others clearly disoriented by the scale of the installation or the presence of species they'd never seen before. Zarnak moved through the crowd with quiet resolve, his emerald skin shimmering faintly under the artificial light. His wide, lidless eyes scanned the room with sharp precision, taking in the unfamiliar forms of his fellow recruits. He had prepared for war in theory, studied conflict as an abstraction in his planet's educational pods, but this interstellar convergence of potential and paranoia felt different. Beside him, a lean figure with sky-blue skin and translucent veins walked with a calm expression that belied her tension. Trina had come from a species known not for war, but for their emotional acuity. Her presence in the military academy was an anomaly, a contradiction wrapped in soft-spoken wisdom. She turned to Zarnak. Her voice carried through subtle pulses only he could interpret. "You feel it, too," she said without speaking, projecting her thoughts in a gentle wave. Zarnak responded with a slight nod. Too many ambitions, not enough purpose. The hall was a marvel of alien architecture, high ceilings lined with floating light rings, benches that adjusted shape depending on who sat, and consoles at every table, each synced to a cadet's biometrics. Instructors stood at the front, some of them ex-military, others academic advisors or species liaisons, their faces unreadable. A voice echoed to the chamber, deep and layered with multiple tonal frequencies designed to resonate across species. "Cadets, you've been chosen not simply for skill, but for capacity. You represent over 30 worlds. You are here to become defenders of peace, protectors of law, and if necessary, warriors." Some cadets straightened with pride. Others, like Trina, remained still, unmoved by the glorification of violence. Training began immediately. The academy was efficient, ruthlessly so. There was no room for hesitation. Simulation pods immersed cadets in zero-gravity scenarios, split-second crisis negotiations, and energy blade hand combat. On Zarnak's second day, he sparred with a cadet from a methane-breathing world who used 3 arms in coordinated strikes. He lost, barely avoiding disqualification due to a shoulder injury. In the evenings, cadets returned to communal quarters where tension often simmered beneath the surface. Arguments flared between species whose ancestors had warred. Cultural misunderstandings turned into near-physical altercations. Yet through it all, Zarnak watched, learning patterns. He didn't speak often, but when he did, others listened. His quiet observation held weight. Trina became a strange or a moral compass among the cadets, often intervening in disputes not with force, but presence. Her gift, an empathic transmission of calm, could spread across a room like a breeze. Most cadets respected her, even feared her ability to sense their emotions without consent. The central conflict began subtly, seeded by a sudden change in the curriculum. On the 3rd cycle, cadets were called into the main strategy hall without warning. Holographic banners marked the event only as Level 9 Combat Study. That classification was rare, usually reserved for high-risk simulations or sensitive historical briefings. Zarnak entered the hall with wary anticipation. Trina followed, silent as always, but her eyes clouded with unease. Across the chamber, cadets murmured among themselves. Whispers of Earth had started circulating days earlier, in fragmented comments from instructors and encrypted hints in the data modules. Earth, a name wrapped in contradiction. A small planet by galactic standards, but rich in culture, technology, and an unparalleled history of warfare. Some cadets dismissed the place as primitive. Others feared it as legend. The room dimmed. The chatter ceased. The main display, one of the largest in the facility, flickered to life. At first, there was only static. Then a voice, human and flat, began narrating over grainy black and white footage. Trench warfare. Europe. Earth year 1916. The screen exploded into movement, mud, smoke, and chaos. Human soldiers, filthy, frightened, and barely older than cadets watching, charged over barren ground littered with corpses. Explosions tore through the dirt. Bodies fell and didn't rise. Zarnak's pulse slowed as he watched. He had trained for scenarios involving casualties. But this wasn't simulation. This was real. No resetting the field. No reviving the fallen. The footage continued, evolving through centuries. Bombings, executions, civil wars, the rise and fall of ideologies, nuclear devastation. The more advanced the technology became, the more precise and cold the destruction. The screen transitioned from black and white to color, then to high definition. The war never stopped, only changed shape. A sharp gasp broke the silence. A cadet with coral-colored skin clutched her abdomen, collapsing to the ground. Medical drones zipped in. Another cadet, from a waterborne species, began muttering uncontrollably in their native clicks, their limbs shivering. Trina S.'s fingers trembled. She reached out unconsciously, as if trying to soothe the images themselves. "Why would they show this to us?" she whispered aloud this time. Zarnak didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was caught in a loop, watching a human soldier, a man covered in dust and blood, drag a wounded comrade through gunfire, screaming at an enemy he couldn't see. There was no glory in his eyes. Only rage. Only survival. When the footage ended, the lights returned slowly. The silence that followed was thicker than the darkness had been. No voice offered explanation. No instructor stood up. Trina looked at Zarnak, her face pale and unreadable. "This wasn't training," she said softly. "This was a warning." Cadets began standing, some leaving in stunned silence, others murmuring questions. Not anyone in particular, but as if saying the words could undo the images. Zarnak remained seated. Something had cracked in his understanding, not just of war, but of purpose. He had always believed peace was maintained through readiness. But Earth had been ready, always, and still it bled. He didn't notice his hands trembling until Trina touched his arm. She was scared, and that scared him more than the footage. "This will change everything," she said. Zarnak didn't know whether to feel relief or dread, but he knew one thing with unsettling clarity. Tomorrow, the academy would be different. Some cadets would not return to their beds. Others might never return to the field. And whatever resolve had brought them to the stars, it had just been tested by the worst of one small planet. He stood, slowly, silently, and with Trina at his side, he stepped into a corridor that suddenly felt much longer than before. The next morning, the academy halls were quieter, not silent. There was always a hum of machinery, the whisper of automatic doors, the faint clatter of cadet boots, but quieter in a way a battlefield settles after the first shots are fired. The mood had changed. Zarnak barely slept. The images from the previous evening replayed every time he closed his eyes. Blood-soaked trenches, firestorm skies, the expression on that human soldier's face as he fired blindly into smoke. It hadn't been duty. It hadn't even been hate. It had been fear. Primal, endless fear. He wasn't alone in his unrest. Trina stood beside the dining console, her food untouched, arms folded tightly across her chest. She no longer attempted to mask her thoughts. Her psychic field radiated with grief and static, a turbulence even the most stoic of cadets could feel. When the second notification came, it arrived with no ceremony, flashing across every console and comm device simultaneously. Mandatory. Continuation of Level 9 combat study. Hall A1. All cadets. No one dared speak during the walk there. Some exchanged glances. A few lagged behind, their movements sluggish, like they were dragging weight that hadn't been there before. Zarnak watched a cadet named Kalvar, usually boastful and proud, fumble put on his neural visor, his claws shaking. The hall was colder than yesterday. Deliberately, perhaps, as if the academy wanted to strip away comfort, reduce the cadets to raw nerves before continuing. Zarnak took his seat, Trina beside him, and stared straight ahead. The screen lit up again. This time, there was no narrator. A newsreel began, shaky handheld footage. Earth, modern day. A drone whined above a crowded street. People ran, screamed, and the air cracked open as a missile turned a small bakery into a crater. The footage didn't cut away. Civilians, not soldiers. A mother clutching her child. Dust limbs, sobs. Zarnak flinched. Next came helmet cam recordings from human soldiers. Modern wars, current conflicts. The perspective shifted with each clip from one battlefield to another. Mud was replaced by sand. Green forests gave way to concrete slums. Every clip told the same story. Briefings drowned by explosions. Camaraderie cut short by sniper fire. Commands barked over chaos. Trina gasped as one soldier stepped over a fallen comrade, without a pause, focused only on his objective. The camera lingered a moment too long on the body left behind. Blood pooled. A hand twitched once, then stilled. "They record everything," she whispered. Zarnak's fists clenched. To remember or to glorify? The footage shifted. Urban combat in a bombed-out city. One soldier kicked down a door, shouting commands in a language the locals didn't understand. A flash. A scream. The screen went white, then cut to slow motion. A detonation. Glass suspended midair. A young boy's body thrown backward by the force. A ripple spread through the hall. One cadet stood up abruptly, shaking. "I can't," he muttered. "I didn't sign up for this." He walked out. No one stopped him. Another followed, then a third. The instructors remained at the edges of the hall, unmoving, silent, watching. Zarnak stayed. So did Trina. Not out of strength, but paralysis. There was something in this horror they needed to understand. Something deeper than tactics or trauma. Next came interrogation footage. Blurred faces, distorted voices. Screams. "Please." The justification scrolled across the bottom in cold, bureaucratic language. Enhanced techniques for intelligence extraction. Trina covered her face. Her shoulders trembled. Zarnak felt his breath slow, not out of calm, but necessity. His body was reacting instinctively, preparing for a shock. He forced himself to watch. If this was Earth's truth, he had to witness it whole. The final segment began without warning. A press conference. Earth military leaders speaking proudly of technological advancements, showing off unmanned weaponry, automated defense systems, cybernetic soldiers. Applause echoed. Then, juxtaposed in brutal contrast, came body counts. Images of refugee camps. Environmental collapse zones turned war zones. Children with plastic rifles, mimicking the very footage the cadets had just watched. The screen went dark. No announcement followed. Zarnak exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. The silence in the hall was heavy. Not the absence of sound, but the kind of stillness that follows when something inside breaks and nothing rushes to replace it. Cadets were crying openly now. Not many, but enough. The proud ones sat with hunchbacks. The curious ones stared at the floor. The brave looked sick. Trina turned to Zarnak, her voice a thin thread. "This isn't about Earth." He looked at her, unsure what she meant. "They're not just showing U.S. war. They're showing us what happens when duty forgets compassion, when purpose is swallowed by power." Zarnak nodded slowly. He saw it now, too. The footage wasn't just brutality. It was a mirror, not of the cadet species, but of what any civilization could become, given enough time, enough fear, enough reasons. The instructors finally stepped forward. A tall being with silver-gray skin and deep red eyes spoke first. "We do not train you to become them. We train you so you never have to." Another instructor followed. Understanding conflict means understanding those who lived it and those who caused it. Earth is not unique in its bloodshed, only in the clarity of its record. The words hung in the air, insufficient, but they were all that were offered. Cadets were dismissed without formality. No one moved for a long time. When Zarnak finally stood, his legs ached. Trina didn't rise right away. She remained seated, her eyes distant, as though watching something no one else could see. Zarnak touched her shoulder lightly. She looked up, weary. "We're not done, are we?" he asked. She shook her head. No, this was only the introduction. Outside the hall, the academy felt colder. The corridors echoed with footsteps that no longer marched in rhythm. Groups that once chatted freely walked in silence. Word had already begun to spread. Resignations had been filed. Some cadets left that very night. Others simply disappeared. Zarnak returned to his quarters and sat on the edge of his sleep platform. Staring at the far wall, he thought of his home world. Peaceful, orderly, shielded from the rawness of violence. They had believed strength came from restraint. And yet, here he was brought face to face with what restraint failed to stop. He closed his eyes and saw the human soldier again. Not the death, not the destruction, just the eyes. Afraid, exhausted, alive. Tomorrow, Zarnak would need to decide what to do with everything he now knew. But tonight, he let the weight of it settle in. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But he didn't look away either. The Academy's solar dome rotated slowly, bathing the upper spires in pale white light, normally a symbol of balance and enlightenment. Today it cast long, fractured shadows through the corridors. Zarnak stood by one of the transparent panels, his eyes following the soft orbit of moons around the home planet below, a planet untouched by war, at least not like the ones he had now seen. Across the mess hall, cadets whispered in tight knots. Some looked over their shoulders, speaking low. The footage had fractured more than just morale. It had seeded doubt, deep invasive, the kind that grew in silence. Over 50 resignations had been filed, not even counting the transfers to non-combat divisions. Entire squads had dissolved overnight. And yet, drills continued. Weapons programs resumed. Orders stood. Zarnak was no longer sure whether they were preparing for war or bracing for its memory. Trina appeared beside him, her expression distant. "They're testing us," she said softly. Zarnak didn't turn. "To see who's still willing?" "No," she replied. "To see who's still capable of choosing." A low chime interrupted them. Not the Academy's typical bell tones. This one was sharp, urgent. A directive shimmered across every terminal simultaneously. Advanced Combat Ethics Seminar. Attendance mandatory. Location, Nexus Vault. Zarnak's brow furrowed. The vault? That's off limits. Trina didn't respond. Her face had gone pale. The vault was buried deep beneath the Academy, a place spoken of only in whispers, where simulations merged with archived consciousness recordings, where strategy and philosophy collided under controlled hallucination. No cadet had ever been summoned there. Until now, they descended in silence, the transport platform gliding through layers of reinforced alloy. Other cadets joined, quiet, tense. No one joked. No one speculated. The atmosphere was too brittle for levity. The vault doors opened with a hiss. Inside, it was nothing like they'd imagined. No cold machines. No gray, lifeless chambers. Instead, the room resembled an ancient amphitheater carved from obsidian, illuminated by pulsing lights that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of thought itself. A single presence stood at its center. Not an instructor, not even a being. A projection, massive, fluid, shaped from memory and data. Its form shifted continuously, never settling on a single species or voice. It was every instructor who had taught them, every soldier they had studied, every victim they had seen. "I am the aggregate," it said, voice layered with 1,000 tones, formed from the minds of those who served and those who perished. I exist to ask the question your instructors cannot. No one dared breathe. Why do you fight? Silence. Then, slowly, a cadet stepped forward. Rickson, from the southern quadrants. "To defend our worlds." "Define defense," the aggregate responded. "Is it preservation? Preemption? Domination disguised as security?" Rickson faltered. "To protect life." "Whose?" The word echoed like thunder. Zarnak felt the weight of it press against his chest. He stepped forward. "Those who cannot protect themselves," he said. The aggregate turned toward him. Its face momentarily mirrored that of a fallen child from the human footage. "And when your protection causes more suffering than absence." Zarnak hesitated. "Then it is not protection. It is conquest." The projection shifted again, now mimicking the expressions of terrified civilians from war zones. What if the line between protection and conquest is only drawn after the fact, when history has already chosen its victor? Murmurs stirred in the chamber. The aggregate raised a hand. Silence returned. "You have seen Earth's past," it continued. "Now, you will witness something more personal." The air shimmered. A simulation unfolded. Not a recording, but a full sensory dive. Each cadet was submerged in a shared vision. The vault dissolved. They were in a village, non-human, distant from Earth, peaceful. Children played in fields. Elders taught history through music. Then came the ships. Unmarked, foreign, brutal. The village was not strategic. No weapons. No resistance. And yet it was destroyed. Efficiently. Without hesitation. Zarnak recognized one of the attackers. Not human. One of their own species. The vision ended. Back in the vault, cadets were trembling. Some had fallen to their knees. Others stared ahead, empty-eyed. The aggregate's voice lowered. This occurred during a campaign labeled resource optimization. The perpetrators were exonerated. Their motives justified. The act erased. Zarnak could hardly process the rush of emotions. Shame, betrayal, fury. They said we never knew violence, Trina murmured. But it was only hidden. The aggregate turned to her. And now that you know, what will you do? The cadets looked around, desperate for guidance. There is no correct answer, the aggregate said. Only consequences. The vault began to dim. One more trial, the voice said. Another simulation. This time, the cadets were the aggressors, given orders to invade, suppress, and eliminate opposition. No context, no strategy, just action. Zarnak hesitated. His rifle felt heavier than it should. Targets appeared, creatures barely armed, retreating, terrified. He dropped the weapon. The simulation froze. All eyes turned to him. The aggregate regarded him silently, then spoke. You have chosen. Trina followed suit. Her weapon fell, untouched. Others joined, one by one, until only a few remained, weapons raised, faces unreadable. The simulation ended. The vault returned. The aggregate stood silent. You are dismissed, it said. Your decisions have been recorded. No commendation. No punishment. Just a quiet way to finality. The cadets filed out, altered. Zarnak didn't speak as they ascended. Neither did Trina. They didn't need to. The line had been drawn, not by the Academy, not by history, but by themselves. Back in the main atrium, a list of cadets eligible for advancement was projected on a central pillar. Zarnak's name was there. Trina S. was not. He turned to her, uncertain. I declined, she said quietly. Why? Because what I learned down there wasn't how to fight. It was when not to. Zarnak understood, and for the first time since the footage, he allowed himself a small breath of clarity. The war they feared wasn't out there. It was in them, and it had already begun. The sky above the Academy had turned a deep violet, the kind that came just before the stars emerged. For most cadets, the day was over. Training modules shut down. Barracks lights dimmed. But for those still on the list, those who hadn't resigned, hadn't broken, hadn't walked away, the next chapter began now. Zarnak stood in a private debriefing chamber, the low hum of energy fields vibrating through the walls. The atmosphere was colder, sharper than anywhere else in the facility. Before him hovered a triad of senior command figures, their faces obscure behind shifting holographic veils. Their voices were synthesized, layered with distortion, not to intimidate, but to remove individuality. They were here not as beings, but as the will of the Alliance. You have been tested, the central figure said, not for obedience, but for perspective. Zarnak gave a respectful nod, not trusting his voice to remain steady. We do not seek soldiers who follow. We require leaders who understand what they are leading others into. You continued. You chose. And now, the time has come to face the purpose behind your endurance. A brief pause, as if they were assessing his readiness one last time. There is a mission, one the others were never intended to see. Zarnak frowned. A real one. The figures inclined slightly. Real in every sense, and far more complex than any battlefield. He was handed a data shard. Its surface pulsed faintly, encrypted at the highest level. He hadn't even known this classification existed. The humans have made contact, the left figure said. Zarnak blinked. What? Not officially, not openly, but an outreach, clumsy, coded, cautious, has been received. A subset of Earth's population is aware of the greater galactic order. A minority, but growing. Trina F's voice echoed in his memory. This isn't about Earth. They're showing us what any civilization can become. What do they want? Understanding. Perhaps peace. Perhaps protection. Perhaps leverage. We don't know yet. That is your task. To determine their motive and our response. Zarnak hesitated. Why me? The central voice softened, ever so slightly. Because you did not look away. Because you refuse both blind aggression and passive denial. Because you are what they might become. The shard grew warmer in his hand. You will leave within the hour. You may choose one to accompany you. No more. Zarnak knew, even before the words left their mouths, who he would ask. He found Trina where the sunlights curved into the archive's wing. She sat cross-legged, eyes closed, sifting through archived resonance patterns, memories of civilizations long gone. You're leaving, she said, opening her eyes. Zarnak nodded. They want me to meet the ones who reached out. She smiled sadly. So the experiment continues. He stepped closer. They said I could bring someone. Trina shook her head gently. I already made my choice. I'm staying here. To teach. To remember. Silence stretched between them. Not empty. Full of everything they wouldn't need to say. Zarnak nodded once. He respected her path, even if it diverged from his own. I'll come back, he said quietly. Maybe, she replied. Or maybe the one who returns won't be you. An hour later, Zarnak stood aboard the stealth-class transport. The pilot, a synthetic being with no face and an elegant sense of timing, nodded without words and initiated departure. The Academy shrank behind them, a glimmer of rigid order in a galaxy spinning out of control. The journey to Earth was silent. No stars zipped past. No music filled the cabin. Only the soft thrum of navigation pulses and the weight of Zarnak's thoughts. He read the data on the shard over and over. Intercepted broadcasts, encrypted exchanges, subtle signals embedded in media. Humanity, it seemed, had started to ask questions bigger than their atmosphere. 3 days later, he was in orbit, cloaked above Earth's night side. The planet below pulsed with light and contradiction. War still flickered along the edges of continents, while peace tried stubbornly to bloom in city parks and protest signs. The message had come from a group calling themselves the Observers. Scientists, philosophers, a few ex-military, people who had seen the same footage he had, and instead of turning away, had turned upward. Zarnak's ship slipped into low orbit over a mountainous region. Coordinates locked to a quiet valley surrounded by snow-dusted pines. A lone cabin, off-grid, old Earth style. He stepped onto soil, the first of his kind to do so as anything but a whisper in shadows. The door opened before he could knock. The woman who stood there was older, her skin weathered, eyes sharp and tired in equal measure. Behind her, faint lights flickered, an array of makeshift tech grafted from civilian-grade gear and alien remnants smuggled through black channels. You made it, she said simply. Zarnak inclined his head. You asked. She smiled. And here we are, two ghosts from opposite ends of history. Inside, the cabin was modest. A fire crackled. Old books lined the walls. A single screen displayed shifting star charts. You're not military, Zarnak said. Not anymore, she replied. But I remember what it looked like. He studied her. You saw the footage. All of it, and more. Some of us never stopped digging. Why call us? She sat across from him. Because Earth is on a precipice. And before we fall, before we become the monster in someone else's archives, I thought maybe we should try something different. Zarnak considered her words. Like peace. She chuckled. Like honesty. And maybe a warning. He leaned forward. Go on. She tapped the table. A new feed began. Civil unrest, misinformation networks, covert weapons development, not unlike those once seen in the Academy simulations. Humanity is accelerating, she said. We're brilliant, desperate, reckless. We don't need invasion to destroy ourselves. We only need momentum. Zarnak frowned. Then what do you want from the Alliance? She looked at him, gaze unwavering. a mirror, and a chance to not become what we fear. He didn't answer at first. The fire crackled between them. Outside, snow had begun to fall. "I can't promise help," he said finally, "or contact, or anything beyond observation." She nodded. "Observation is enough. It means we're not alone." As the night deepened, Zarnak stood by the window, watching snowflakes dissolve on the glass. The woman poured tea behind him, unbothered by the silence. They both knew the words had already been said. In the quiet of that cabin, two worlds, one ancient in war, one young in ambition, breathed and synced for the first time. And somewhere above, stars burned steadily, indifferent but waiting.